Welcome to Seen and Heard. My name is Amanda Russell, and I'm the Communications Consultant for Western United Dairies. Today on the podcast, we have Anja Raudabaugh, who is going to talk to us about the PRB meeting that happened on October 30th, as well as the upcoming meeting on November 17th.
Yosemite Farm Credit is the farmer's choice for agriculture financing. As a farmer-owned cooperative, we are dedicated to serving our neighbors in the agriculture community with financial products and services tailored to your operation and backed with a relationship you can trust. Whether you're purchasing real estate, making improvements to the dairy, or wanting to purchase or lease equipment, we're here to help our members prosper. Visit our website at YosemiteFarmCredit.com to find a branch location nearest you.
Did you know that you can turn your dairy manure into cash? Bennett Environmental is offering above-ground dairy digesters at no cost to you. These systems can also remove nitrates from your lagoons to help you comply with water board regulations. Our proven above-ground technology will generate income for your dairy into the foreseeable future. Because we truck the renewable natural gas off-site, your dairy can profit regardless of your location. Bennett Environmental, turning your wastewater liabilities into sustainable assets. Learn more at bennett-environmental.com.
Okay. Anja, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So about a week ago on the 30th, there was a PRB meeting. Can you give us a bit of a recap on that and kind of like some main takeaways from the meeting?
So the PRB met on October 30th, and it was a spooky PRB meeting. It was right before Halloween, and I think that everybody had too much Halloween candy already. But they met to discuss a lot of critical quota issues that have started to all crop up at the same time. And so about an hour into it, there were a number of housekeeping items that the PRB and the CDFA legal counsel discussed, and I can kind of go through some of those. But the biggest item on the agenda, well, there were kind of two big ones. The biggest one that they ended up rolling up their sleeves and having some conversations about had to do with the mandatory 5-year marketing survey. Now, again, to refresh our members' memories, QIP became a standalone program within CDFA's purview when the industry decided to go into the federal order. And as part of the marketing branch of CDFA, just like any other checkoffs, for example, CMAB, I know our members are familiar with that one, but if you are a member growing asparagus in California, to make sure that farmers are happy with their checkoff. And the results of this survey were mixed at best, 50% happy, 50% unhappy at worst. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But then the other major issue that the PRB met to discuss what the heck to do with itself on was whether or not they had any recommendations for the secretary on a petition to terminate the quota program, which did recently qualify as announced by CDFA. From farmers pre-marketing program in 2017, so pre-federal order, there had been this balance in the account, and CDFA did not know what to do with that. They didn't know if it was farmer money, if it belonged to some processor fund, or how they'd gotten it. And so they did a lot of investigation and figured out at the end of this that it was actually farmer money. But what they decided to do, without a lot of, I think, direct input before they made that decision, was to actually keep it to administer the quota program. Draw down a little bit lower than the department likes. So what they decided to do with this about 5.2, I think I read another figure where it was closer to $5.7 million, is keep it in reserves so that if we do have production challenges in the future, the department can decide that they can dip into that and they won't have to assess farmers more money. So depending on your point of view, you either liked that outcome or you thought that farmers are really hurting and that there should have been a decision by the PRB board to have a say over how that money was either distributed back out to quota holders or to farmers, or whether or not it should have stayed in CDFA's coffers. And they decided to kind of punt a broader conversation until the next PRB meeting, which is actually on November 17th. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So there was a couple other, I'm going to call them housekeeping items. Another one was consideration of a hardship request. A dairy family had submitted a hardship request on the grounds that they were no longer owning quota and they shouldn't have been assessed for quota, and they were asking for either some money back or for the assessment, even though they're raising grade A milk, to go away. And that consideration was denied by the PRB by a vote of 8-4. And so this has been an ongoing issue within the PRB walls the last several years. There have been a lot of hardship requests made on these grounds that the farmer either didn't own any quota anymore and shouldn't have to pay into the program, or there were some other circumstances that he or she felt required a relief from that assessment. At the moment, the PRB board does not see that point of view, and they feel like the grounds of collecting an assessment for quota would be severely questioned if they started making and granting those hardship requests. So once again, they denied that. For farmers, dairy farmers that have been around much longer than I have, hardship requests were usually considered by the PRB once in a blue moon, and they usually involved a dairy farmer passing away and either his partner not exactly knowing about the assessment, or they sold the dairy, and there were just some really unique circumstances surrounding relieving themselves of that assessment. So they've never granted a hardship consideration on the grounds that you no longer own quota.
Would you encourage producers to submit hardship requests in the future?
This is producer money. I think farmers should always have a say, a democratic say in how their money is used and spent. So if a farmer feels like it's the right decision to ask the PRB for consideration, I'm really glad that there's a more robust hardship consideration going on right now. I think people need to hear this. I think CDFA needs to hear this. So I'm never in favor of stifling a farmer's voice. And so everybody can submit a hardship request. It's up to the PRB and how they take that consideration.
So let's get a little bit more into the petition. What are the next steps, or what can we expect?
Yeah. So I think that the petition process is kind of new to a lot of people. It's only been around it's been around for a long time with a lot of different programs within CDFA, but for quota, it's only really been available for farmers to use to express their satisfaction with quota, their dissatisfaction, or in this case, some recommendations to change it. It's only really been around since about 2018 when the new QIP, Quota Implementation Program, actually went into effect and became the Quota Assessment Program. A lot of acronyms here. And what the petition process is it's almost like early voting, where you can, as any farmer or any group, decide that you want to change quota. You alert the department, let them know which portion of the statute and how you want to change quota, and that you will be circulating a petition amongst farmers. Farmers have to respond. They have to receive 25% of the signatories of market milk producers in the state. So if, for easy math, if there are 1,000 dairy farmers registered as grade A market milk producers, 250 of them have to sign this petition in order for it to qualify. There are several steps for a petition to even qualify. CDFA has to verify that the signature is actually a signature they have on file, that it's an owner of a dairy, that it's someone who legally can sign. So like not your herdsman, for example. Trust me, that's happened. And so there's a lot of verification that CDFA has to do on the back end to make sure that that 25% threshold is accurate and it can hold up in a court of law. Okay. So since quota has become part of the new state single run program, or basically a program run by the state. There have been 6 different petitions filed to terminate or change the quota program. Recently in 2021, an organization called United Dairy Families of California attempted to change the program after a lot of stakeholder input, and they wanted to sunset quota in about 5 years. That qualified as a petition and then was run as a referendum. And so there's an important distinction here. In order to get a referendum in front of all dairy farmers in California, you have to go through the steps to qualify your petition. We now have we're calling it petition number 5, offered by Stop Quip, which stands for Stop the Quota Implementation Program. They've submitted, this is their 5th petition, and this 5th one has finally qualified according to the rules to terminate the quota program. And so now the PRB is faced with consideration of what to do with itself and how to make a recommendation to the secretary. And I would point out that the PRB in this moment is a recommending body to the secretary. They don't have, unlike Hardships, any final say. The secretary does put a lot of weight, however, on what to do with quota based on their feedback. And so this was extremely contentious. There were a lot of questions from this PRB board on October 30th about how this petition had qualified. CDFA verified that just over 330 signatures were actually collected, which, given that there are 900 market milk producers in the state, that met the threshold to qualify. And so it was so contentious that neither staff or legal counsel for CDFA was truly prepared to handle the outpouring of emotions and conversation. So they decided to have a special PRB meeting on November 17th with a Zoom option. So dairy farmers from throughout the state can listen and participate if they want, just to discuss the pros and cons of this petition and to see if they can arrive at some kind of conclusion that would result in a recommendation to the secretary. The PRB board is very much divided. There are a lot of, I think, folks in the middle on that board, but there are some very passionate folks that spoke up during this hearing, in particular, or excuse me, this meeting, that were very direct in how they felt the quota program should go. And those opinions ranged from, this is something I bought and I'll be damned if somebody takes it away from me, to this is something that someone else sold and they got their money out of it, and I'll be damned if I'm going to pay them twice, to a lot of very impassioned people that say they've not owned quota, that they can never afford to buy it. Again, there was a lot of emotion, a lot of passion on this issue. So I do encourage dairy farmers, if they care about this one way or the other, to listen in and plan on testifying at this November 17th hearing. There is a Zoom option, which we will put on our social media page and our website. CDFA,
we'll include the show notes as well.
Yeah, I guess CDFA doesn't work on Mondays, so it didn't make our update this week. But we'll make sure we include a special version of it so people can plan. But there's also an in-person option. This is going to be held at the Tulare County Ag Commissioner's office. We'd previously reported that it would be at the Heritage Center, still in that complex, but it's just going to be just up the street in a separate building. So again, both virtual and in-person will be provided. And they punted that. So in about 10 days from now, there will be another conversation. I would say the secretary is very interested to know what people think about this. Because concurrently, the other major issue du jour for this particular PRB meeting was the 5-year QUIP effectiveness survey. And so there's a lot of, I think, trains on each side of the track here, and they're all coming together. They might not be going the same direction. But the results of this survey, other than being mixed, I'll start with some of the basic numbers that were provided. And if you have questions about what the actual survey looked like, it's in our website. It's in our update. You can actually go and look at the crosstabs yourself. You can see exactly the methodology that the consultants who were hired used to run the survey. It was very thorough. But out of even an extension of the survey process, CDFA only received responses from 275 dairy producers. And you can imagine the ones that took the time to fill the survey out had very strong opinions about quota. So of those responding, of those 275, the results were almost right down the middle, with those having owned quota feeling that it has value and generally maybe could use a few modernization changes, but generally speaking was working. And then the other half said, we don't own quota and we hate it and we want it to go away. And here's some reasons why. The responses, again, I've only been around this issue 8 years, but I know a lot of my farmers that have great influence on me would agree reading these responses. They're the same responses that they've seen for 30, 40, or 50 years. But one of the themes that keeps coming through, and I think it's really important to mention from a trade-based association that exists off of voluntary dues from up-and-coming generational farmers, is that there is a barrier to entry for a lot of the younger dairy farmers coming into dairying in California. They are leveraged to the hilt with the bank. They do not have space in their asset sheet to buy quota right now. That came through very clearly on both the pro and the anti-quota side, that sentiment that there is a huge problem here bringing younger people into the business. I know personally, we've helped a lot of young dairy farmers coming through Dairy Leaders that have had just a tremendous amount of challenges getting a bank loan for 100 cows that can't even consider an asset like this. And yet, about 32 to 36 cents of their milk check every month goes towards this assessment. So it is a conversation, and it's a very important one. And so of that survey, and the consultant went through a number of the slides and some of the crosstabs, very interesting, but there was some intense discussion that followed along the same lines because the PRB was being asked by CDFA to make a robust recommendation to the Secretary of Ag about what the heck to do with itself with this information. And so I'll read the motions because they got really tough towards the end, but there was probably 12 or 13 different motions offered that didn't get accepted.
Wow.
But yeah, it was really hard to follow, even sitting in the room right behind these guys. So the motion to recommend to the Secretary that the QIP be voted on again, the same way the producers approved it in 2017, was offered. It was seconded. It was discussed and ultimately defeated only 6-4. So I thought that was worth mentioning. Another motion that was offered to the Secretary that was seconded and discussed was that she develop the next steps based off the survey, which also failed, closer to 5-2 at that point. So I think people were getting pretty tired. But the final motion that was accepted on this survey was a motion offered to recommend that the Secretary, based on the results of a split survey, that the PRB receive additional technical assistance by way of third-party moderator to facilitate the ideas of the industry. So this passed 7-3, and those of us that are paying attention will recognize that this sounds very familiar to the process that United Dairy Families of California undertook in 2019 and 20, when they tried to establish some inter-industry panels, working groups. And so the PRB is essentially asking for support to do that from the Secretary. And so, again, that one passed, I think, a little bit more smoothly. So, yeah, I'm obviously giving the vanilla summary of it, but both...
So,
go ahead.
So on that, would we essentially be waiting for more details down the road to know what the next steps are?
It's a real challenge because the Secretary will want to know what the PRB's recommendation is on the termination petition, if I were her, before I would make any judgment calls on what to do with the survey. Because the petition, and this is another thing I failed to mention earlier, has a very short timeline of turnaround for action by CDFA. They have, I can't remember exactly how many days. I want to say it's like 90 working days to either have the Secretary deny the petition or move it forward to a referendum. And so she really needs this November 17th date to be robustly attended. She will need feedback from not just the PRB, but members of the public on how they want her to handle this petition. And so I think she's probably going to punt on the technical service request until after she gets the feedback on what to do with the termination petition.
We also have a recap of the 30th meeting that ran in the newsletter last week. And that's up on the website too, so they can go back and kind of look at those.
Their Halloween edition.
Yeah, the Halloween edition. Yeah. Okay, so is there anything else producers need that you would encourage them to do for this upcoming meeting? Get involved, obviously.
Well, I think in 2019 and 20, the Western United Dairies Board took a very tough series of positions to support the process for quota to be voted in or out the same way it was put into place, which was by a referendum of producers. And so it's encouraging to see democracy in action, but it doesn't work if less than a quarter of the farmers actually vote. And so I think, as with American democracy, don't cry about the results you didn't get when you didn't show up. This is a really important time. It's an inflection point in quota. We've had quite a few the last few years. And I think that if you and your family care about this issue either way, this is your moment to be heard on it. It's your moment to make the case, however you see it, because the secretary is listening, and she's in a corner now where she's going to have to make some decisions that will really impact the outcome of this program. And that hasn't been the case since the UDFC petition in 2021. And it hasn't been the case since, 3-4 years before that, when we were thinking about the federal order. So there's been a lot of challenges, and I think that it's a really good time for people to get involved and to have a meeting. Yeah, I mean, this is a special meeting they're doing on the 17th. It's unabridged, meaning there's not going to be any flim-flam housekeeping items. So they're only talking about the petition, along with they were going to talk about one more thing. I'm trying to remember what it was. Oh, they wanted a little bit more feedback. CDFA wanted a little bit more feedback from the PRB on this this fund that was sitting in there, the equalization fund. So they're going to talk a little bit about that, but mostly it's about this petition to terminate. So this is a good time for producers to write to the secretary. On the meeting announcement, there is an email address that you can drop your comments into. But I definitely encourage robust attendance. I think that we're at a critical point in the crossroad here, left or right.
Yeah, sounds like the time is now. So we'll have all of that meeting information in the show notes and on the website, and then we'll include it in the newsletter next week too. So there's plenty of opportunities to have that information.
Yeah, very good.
All right, cool. Well, thanks for coming on, and hope you have a great week.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks for listening to Seen and Heard. If you have any questions about the episode, shoot us an email at podcast@wudairies.com. Also, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Are you tired of hearing that the main way to save water is fallowing? Are you tired of seeing articles about how alfalfa and corn waste water? At Common Good Water, we combine the best-in-class subsurface drip system and precision crop management services, including pest control. Our verification program qualifies for public funding, and we want to help you continue farming in California. Contact your groundwater sustainability agency and ask how you can work with Common Good Water. Visit commongoodwater.com.
Pacific Gas and Electric is here to remind you that signs keep you safe. Sections of our natural gas transmission pipeline travel underground and beneath agricultural land. For the safety of you, your family, and your employees, pipeline markers are placed to indicate the approximate location of the pipe as a reminder to use extra care. Removing a pipeline marker creates a serious safety hazard. To have additional markers placed or report damaged or missing markers, please call your PG&E account manager or our Agricultural Customer Service Center at 877-311-3276. To learn more, visit www.pge.com/agsafety. Remember, signs keep you safe.
Thank you to the Western United Dairies generous business sponsors, the Morning Star Company, Holt of California, Farm Credit Alliance, PG&E, Arata, Swingle, Van Egmond and Goodwin Law Offices, Yosemite Farm Credit, F&R Ag Services, Moss Energy Works, California Dairy Magazine, Bennett Environmental, and Common Good Water. We appreciate our sponsors and thank them for their continued support. While Western United Dairies respects the varied views of our guests, please note that the opinions expressed in the Seen and Heard podcast may not necessarily reflect the positions of the Western United Dairies Board of Directors or our sponsors. If you would like more information on how to sponsor Western United Dairies or this podcast, please send us an email at info@wudairies.com.